Okay, so Matthew, I want to find an excuse in this episode to somehow call it something about like Mac versus PC. Do you think we can do that?
Easily.
And part of the reason I wanted to chat with you is because like you're a guy that knows computers on both sides. You know the whole world of computing. You cover a lot of products, like just numbers wise. The amount of things you test on your YouTube channel is pretty immense. You go through a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, lately it's just been laptops, and it's been kind of nice because of smartphones haven't been as interesting as they used to be. So it feels like everyone's at home. They're looking for laptops. A lot of people are gaming now. They're looking for like neat ways to hack their work from home setups. So it feels great to just like review all these really cool laptop products.
And you like lately you've also had more Mac stuff as well. So now I feel like we have more in common. We can chat about it. But
we can be friends.
Yeah. Well, and okay. So although I do want to get a little bit of a beef going with Mac PC, I also want to say like my position on PCs is that I love my memories of using them a lot. I love the idea of integrating them into my workflow in ways that I don't right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my workflow is, almost entirely Mac at this point. I only kind of dabble into PC for random little things or to test one out. But I'd love to just talk about the state of both platforms right now, how you feel about both of them. And then we both tested out the new iMac 27-inch lately. And I think we both have some thoughts on that. And I think you'll have the more detailed thoughts on that than I will, because part of the perspective you lose on the Mac side is hardware components.
Right,
you only get to try what you're given from Apple, and that's the boring part, right? You don't get to swap stuff in and out. You don't get to build something from scratch. Whereas you have, I think, a lot more of like you see each individual part.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the beauty of being able to dabble in the PC world, because like a lot of the Mac components that are inside the Mac are obviously some of the same components that are being used in a PC. So when you're able to like really get down to the nitty gritty and test out these components and see how they affect the rest of the computer, you get to see like a different aspect of it. Some people will call it enthusiast. I think whether it's enthusiast or not, I think it's a good way to educate yourself because you know how your computer's working. Some people don't care because at the end of the day, these are tools, but it gives you a different perspective. Like it gives you a different perspective on how these companies work. Like Apple has always, had the goal of making things simple for people. Don't worry about upgrading this. Don't worry about opening that. This is what it's going to do. Just buy it. It's been optimized for these situations. You're going to love it. Whereas the PC, it's a little bit clunkier. No matter how much the vendors try, sometimes the finesse is just not there, but it gives some people the opportunity to expand further down the road.
Well, let's start with the 27-inch iMac because it can give us some of the framework to talk about other specific issues. First of all, how did you feel about it? You tested it out. Which model were you using? What did you have in your spec?
So Apple sent me pretty much the most fully loaded iMac 27-inch. It's the i9. The 32 gigabytes of RAM, Radeon 5700 XT. And
you got the RTX? Wow.
I got a very special version,
well,
just for this video. No, but
lucky.
Which is obviously an AMD GPU, and then of course a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD. So that's the fastest processor you can buy. And the big deal this year with the i9 compared to last year is that instead of having 8 cores, it now has 10. So.
Right. So I think we both got the exact same review model.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody gets the same thing. So we're testing out something very similar. I wasn't able to run. I basically like just kind of got the computer, but I didn't get to run benchmarks. How has it actually been performing for you? Because I haven't had that time yet. I basically just like set it up and got to do my first impressions.
So that's the thing. Like usually when I see an iMac, I'm like, okay, this is going to be tough because Apple's creating an all-in-one, and all-in-one is in this like teeny tiny thin chassis. There's less space for cooling. There's less space for it to breathe, right? And ideally, like the thicker the body, the better the thermals are. Therefore, the harder you can push a computer. And I was expecting to go into this review to see like my custom PC just dominating it, but in typical Apple fashion, depending on what software you're using, there's optimizations to be talked about. So like if you were just to do your standard benchmarks, which don't always tell the full story, my custom i9 10-core PC performs better in Cinebench and 3D Mark Studio because it's using an RTX 2080 Super. But as soon as you start using specific types of software, then the story completely changes.
So specifically, I mean, the one we all know, I think, is Final Cut.
Yes.
Where we can see some pretty crazy differences right away. What else is able to take advantage of it in that way right now?
So I mostly tested the Adobe suite. I tested everything from After Effects to Photoshop to Premiere Pro. I saw it beat out my custom PC, which is using a similar processor or technically a faster processor by a little bit, which was really impressive. So that doesn't really come down to raw hardware performance. There's obviously.
Do you know why? I'm actually surprised to hear that in the Adobe suite it was doing that well.
So if you want, I can give you the raw results from my benchmarks. You can post it in your show notes. But basically, at the end of the day, it comes down to metal, but mostly the amount of VRAM that the 5700 XT has. 16 gigabytes, right? And for example, like my RTX 2080 Super only has 8. So when you're using stuff like After Effects, which is super VRAM hungry, and you're performing these crazy renders, these long renders, which takes a long time depending on what you're pushing out, the iMac ended up slightly beating out the custom PC. Same holds true with Photoshop. I mean, if you're just doing regular, like, touching up a photo or whatever, it doesn't make a difference what computer you use. But, once you start like loading these images and processing them over a long period of time, again, that's where the VRAM comes into play. And I saw the iMac beat out the custom PC. Now, the only time...
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I was like, wow, that's impressive. So like it speaks to the GPU and how the software uses it. And let's face it, Adobe is terrible when it comes to optimizations.
It's driving me insane lately. I'm really thinking about doing a, can I survive without Adobe video?
Honestly, Tyler, I think...
Not because I don't dislike Adobe.
Right.
I'm never going to stop using Photoshop.
Of course.
But there's so many things to make me attracted to the other side. And I've been using Capture One a lot more lately as well. So
yeah, I'm in the same boat. I love the functionality of the software. I just don't like the way it performs. And this is a company who's like the juggernaut of like the creative industry. They have all this amazing tools. You expect it to work better. And every day I'm like, I'm just going to switch over to Final Cut. But then I'm like, then I have to replace all my PCs with Macs, and that's going to cost so much money. And then I have to but I'm still going to subscribe to Adobe anyways because I have to use Photoshop. But maybe I can learn, what's that one on the iPad, but also on the PC and Mac? It's
LumaFusion.
No, not LumaFusion for editing, the photo one. Starts with an A. Affinity. Affinity, that's it, right? A buddy of mine, Canupsi, I'm sure you're familiar with him. He uses Affinity now, but you're still stuck to them. So it's like, what's the point, right? Mm-hmm. But I was just happy to see the iMac basically, perform just as well and
compete.
Compete.
Yeah, I just most of all don't want to feel like I'm giving something up when I use a Mac. Like I'm giving up performance. I want to be able to be at the same level.
And that's the whole point, right? You want it to be, because we know at the end of the day, if you're pushing these things, if it's just like raw CPU performance, of course, my custom PC is going to win out because the thermals are better, the story goes on. But you want to feel like, you're spending all this money on a product, regardless of who the company is. You want it to meet your intentions. And the funny thing is, even when I released my video, there was a bunch of comments of people saying, Matt, this iMac is overpriced. Why are you buying this? These bezels are old. But if you actually take the time and break down the numbers, it's not too far off from my custom built PC. I actually ran the numbers, the fully spec'd i9 is about 4,500 US or 10 billion Canadian. And then you have the custom PC, which is $2,500, but you add on a 5K monitor, that brings it up to 3,700. Then you add in the cost of buying Windows, keyboard, mouse, speakers, and then you're only really saving $200 to $300 on the PC. So it's if you're breaking it down on paper, it's a good deal. It's a good deal.
There are certain times when Macs have been good deals. Sometimes they are not always.
Sure.
Sometimes they're a bad deal.
Right.
But this is a pretty decent one, and I think especially iMacs have always been a good deal because of those monitors as well.
I agree.
I love that 5K. There's the only other monitor I've enjoyed as much has been the LG, the ultrafine display, which I think is the same panels as iMacs. I haven't had any high-end professional monitors. I know there are technically better ones, or the XDR, which I guess I played with it, but I prefer an iMac screen. That's what I want to use, or that LG that is basically equivalent. And I think, yeah, anybody that's not including that in the price equation is part of why they're misled. And I think, actually, maybe I'm skipping ahead here and I'm getting to a bit of, choosing between PC and Mac, but I think there's a lot of people out there that are, when they make that comparison, they're like, well, but what if I don't want the expensive monitor? If I'm doing the PC, I could get all the same specs with, a few $100 4K display. I'm like, well, maybe you might be kind of missing the point then, because the nice thing here, like a lot of what attracts me to it is you're getting a no compromise screen, which is it's just such an important component to me. Like as somebody that creates visual stuff
right
for a living, it's really essential. So
yeah, I mean, like, and even though it's the same screen from like 8 years ago, it's still like one of the best screens you could buy. Like the pricing I gave you with that $1,200 display is the same 5K 5K panel that's inside of the iMac, because you can buy the LG Ultrafine, but it's like this plastic monitor, right? It doesn't have that, beauty that's in the iMac, even though bezels are old. At the end of the day, like, I don't know about you, like a lot of people focus on the subjectiveness of a product, and like, yes, the bezels are big and it's the same design, but I still think it's a beautiful design. It's not like it's aged poorly. You know what I mean? Like no, I still think it's a beautiful all-in-one. And when you're staring at a screen that close, you don't even see the bezels. Like you don't even pay attention to them. It disappears.
Yeah, from a practical standpoint, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the design. Like it's going to go down in history as having been a very successful design. It worked well, and it will feel old once we have something new. Of course, like the bezels will feel even bigger than they do now. But what I talked about in my review is that if anybody actually needs a new computer to get something done, don't be afraid to buy this, because this is the pinnacle of the Intel Macs. They've been working on this framework and this architecture for years and years, many years now, and this is like the time they sort of perfected it. I mean, and to me, even more so than in let's say a MacBook Pro, because the iMac they can throw so much more at it, right? I mean, it's got a better screen, a bigger screen, has, they can put more electricity into that big box. But let's circle back to performance a little bit too. When you're talking, I just wanted to clarify something about the GPU.
Sure. You
were saying that essentially the performance improvements seem to be coming from the additional VRAM.
Right.
That's only in the top of the line card. First of all, if we didn't have that much VRAM, would it still be performing as well, or is kind of all the performance coming from that 16 gigs?
I honestly think, because like these tests I'm running it's from Puget Bench, which is this like company that put this test together, which runs like red files. It does all these 4K multicam timelines for Premiere Pro, and then it does all these different types of renders where it pushes like these machines to its absolute limit. But specifically, would you see better performance if you had less VRAM? I mean, like, would you have 8? Some? Yeah, it would probably, be slightly worse or the same as the PC. Like, I don't think you're gonna see a big benefit, because like other factors from the PC come into play. Like you get better cooling, so your processor is running higher for longer. Does it favor CUDA cores? Like that's what happened with Premiere Pro. That's why Premiere Pro is so good on the iMac. I mean, on the PC, because it prefers those CUDA cores. In fact, the iMac performed just as good as my MacBook Pro 16, which is very weird. So like, it just really comes down to the type of software you're using. And that's unfortunate for people who use Macs and Adobe Premiere Pro. They're not going to feel like they get an upgrade with it. But again, in all fairness, like these types of tests are really doing everything. Like if you're a YouTuber like myself or whoever, I don't think you're going to see that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to bother you. Like the only area that I found that the iMac performed better than the PC was scrubbing the timeline. Like it performed ever so slightly better. But rendering, it was just rendering, to be honest. It was just rendering in Premiere Pro that was slower than the PC. That's what made the score so low.
And I would also say, not like just about your test specifically, but in general, I think a lot of people maybe overvalue render times sometimes.
I agree.
That, if they just look at, Final Cut can crush Premiere in a lot of render times, but if your editing time slows down, like you say, scrubbing the timeline, if you can't move back and forth quickly, that will cost you way more time in the long run in just getting things done. Or if you're just like waiting for a font to load or a preview to kick in or whatever. Those little details that you can get stuck waiting on are really what can eat away at your editing time. So it's super valuable to be able to go, like, keep moving through a project. And until timeline render speeds might like start doubling, which can happen in some situations, but if we're not talking about that, then
absolutely. I mean, like with render times, it really depends. Like, are you working for a production house where you're like rendering 10 videos a day? Then obviously it makes a difference to you. But if you're like me, who's rendering 1 video a day, it's not going to matter. But when it comes to timeline scrubbing, the most important things for Adobe Premiere, at least, is more cores on your CPU and a RAM, especially if you're working with multicam footage. Oh my God, RAM is like the number one thing to have. Like, that's where you'll see the biggest
regular RAM, not VRAM.
Yeah, regular RAM. Sorry, yeah, regular
RAM.
Yeah, RAM.
This episode of the Stalman Podcast is brought to you by Paperlike, and they are actually going to be helping me do this next sponsorship read because I'm reading it off my iPad, and behind me I have some very reflective windows. But Paperlike helps cut down those reflections, just like the nano texture screen of the 27-inch iMac I'm so excited about. So if you have an iPad, you already know how great it is to store your notes, drafts, and sketches digitally, but sometimes drawing with the Apple Pencil doesn't quite feel as good as it does writing on paper. Paperlike is the iPad screen protector for creators and doers that lets you draw and write like it's on paper. Whether you're annotating drafts, taking notes, or sketching out your next big ideas, Paperlike can take all those things to the next level by reducing muscle fatigue caused by writing on a glass tablet and making your iPad feel just like a notebook, all while keeping the convenience of digital. Artists love Paperlike too because it optimizes to create the ideal amount of friction and the right stroke resistance for optimal accuracy. So instead of sliding your pencil around all over a glass surface, it feels like pages in your sketchbook. And unlike other screen protectors, Paperlike enhances your viewing experiences made with superior quality in mind. Paperlike never disrupts the experiences of watching Netflix or YouTube, and the matte anti-glare finish even helps you enjoy your screen time while you're out in the sun. Just like that nano texture display that I am absolutely in love with. Can they make a Paperlike for a 27-inch iMac? And personally, those were the first things I noticed once I applied it to my screen, was how it cut down that glare. That was just what I saw right away before I even touched it. I was just like, hey, those reflections that drive me crazy are gone. And I've kind of been really into that ever since using the iMac, but it also added that nice tactile feel of something a little more organic than, the glass and metal that we're used to on our digital devices. And even though this does feel a lot more like paper, it's not going to make me great at drawing with my iPad, but I've really been enjoying the scribble feature lately, where I'm navigating with my Apple Pencil and then I just start writing text into a search field, and then it just shows up. This is coming in the new version of iPad OS, and it's already been getting me to use my Apple Pencil a lot more. So anything that makes that experience feel better is a very welcome change. So now it's time to go to paperlike.com/Stalman to get yours today. That's Paperlike, like a paper.com/Stalman. Go check them out. And thanks again to Paperlike for supporting the Stalman Podcast. So where, just to finish off on the GPU, where would you place it in, like, how does it compete with NVIDIA's at this moment? Because there's a lot of people on that either are Mac or PC users feel like that's the biggest one of the biggest hardware compromises, specifically not being able to choose NVIDIA graphics cards in Macs. How is that in reality? How much are we losing out at this point?
I mean, if this was like last year or any previous year, then I would say, yeah, that's a really big shame that we don't get NVIDIA GPUs, but AMD has done such a good job with their Navi architecture that the 5700 XT performs really well. Like, to put it in context for NVIDIA users, it's about 10% slower than a NVIDIA RTX 2070 Super or an RTX 2080 Max-Q in a laptop. So it's a really good GPU. Like, this GPU, like, I actually have a gaming video coming out out of all things, because, like, no one buys an iMac to game, but I decided to do it anyways. And sure. Actually, that's where this video is interesting, because you can. Okay. You can. Like, I'm able to 1080p, 1440p game on this iMac comfortably, and I teach people how to hook up a high refresh display to their iMac so they can take advantage of 144 hertz. So
that's cool.
It's competitive. And look, I mean, no one's buying an iMac to game, but if you're someone who likes to game but also works in the industry,
it's the computer that you have. Like,
exactly.
because that's what my situation is. Like, I'm going to keep using a Mac, but sometimes I want to play a game and I'd like it to be able to do it half decently. So
yeah, and you're gonna be able to do this iMac like easily. Like doesn't
Yeah.
matter what game comes to your mind. I promise you'll get good settings when it's even at high settings. So
I want to clarify. I mean, I know you understand this better than I do, but just for anybody listening, that like obviously at higher levels of like, there's some pretty crazy NVIDIA stuff out there, and you can't move into that area with the options available right now. Like you can't. There's some pretty heavy lifting 3D rendering that is just not going to happen on an iMac or an iMac Pro.
yeah,
And I do realize like this is only competing with some of the very good consumer NVIDIA options, not stepping into the world of real professional stuff.
I agree. And the other thing too is like if you with the PC side of things, you also have the option to buy AMD processors, which are huge right now. So you can get more cores for cheaper, which obviously benefit you in those applications like Adobe and DaVinci Resolve that we're just talking about. So like just imagine like an iMac with a Ryzen 3950X, which is like 16 cores, and be the same price because the CPU is the same price. Like you just get so much more performance. So the PC side has that option, but again, at the end of the day, it's the tool that you prefer. Like I personally like the way Mac OS functions over Windows, but I like Windows because it gives me more flexibility to game, to be productive, or whatever my situation is.
Right. And I mean, I'm just looking at the Apple iMac builder on the website right now, and noticing, so you can't access that Radeon Pro without getting the top of the line spec. So first you have to get the kind of the best package, and then you can add it, which is kind of too bad because it's like, and I've seen this from a few different people that have been talking about it, like anybody that's been running benchmarks, Max Yuriev was also doing some stuff with it, and seeing that top GPU perform is what's like really exciting. Like, wow, like this is kicking butt. But then looking at the others, it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of what I would expect. So, it's funny. So I think a lot of the perception or the feedback people are going to hear watching YouTube is like, wow, this is, crushing certain PCs. But that's also like, you got to get all of the bells and whistles. Like you're buying kind of the best one.
You can't mix and match. You can't buy the i7 and get it with the better processor because it's relative to what you do, right? Like if you use DaVinci Resolve, for example, to edit video, you can totally be happy with a 6-core processor and the 5700 XT and have like really good speeds, but you're kind of limited to whatever configuration models that Apple offers.
So what do you have like a favorite build for this? Like where do you think the right balance for somebody, let's say that, edits some video, but isn't doing anything crazy, edits some photos, but isn't doing anything great? What's like an average creative user? Is there like a sweet spot for buying this new iMac?
So I think for the average creative user, let's take a look right here. So we have, if you're the average creative user, you definitely don't need the i9. Like it's completely overkill. Like the performance gain you get from the extra 2 cores will maybe offer you 10%. Like it's not huge.
Cool.
I think for most people who are just using Photoshop,
that's an expensive upgrade, by the way. That's
it's huge.
I'm looking at the Canadian side, I think, but it's $500 just for that. So you're saving a whole bunch right there. And so I was also, in my review, I was like looking for things to cut so that you could still get the nano texture class. Like what could you not do? So what are some things we could save money on here?
Let's see. So we could RAM, get the lowest amount of RAM because that's upgradable.
Yep.
That's like the one thing that Apple's given us. So that gets the least. Okay. Storage is going to be subjective because it depends on your needs. But I think, with 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, maybe you can start off with, let's say, a 1 terabyte or even, 1 terabyte SSD or a 512.
That's my recommended. I think that's a sweet spot. I think 512, you can start running into some basic issues.
That's
like
true.
things. Yeah. And I find like, I store my Dropbox locally, and that alone will take up, I think it's like 500 gigs right now.
Right.
So, you can just get yourself into corners if you've only got 512, even just with your apps. So yeah, I think 1 terabyte is a good starting place for that.
I agree. And then, the Radeon Pro 5300, if I remember correctly, that's like equivalent to, sorry, I'm so NVIDIA because of all the laptops I review, but it's equivalent to, I think, a 1650 Ti or 1660, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that. But if you're not doing much of, I would say, if you're using Adobe Premiere, it's not as important. You're better spending on money later on RAM. But if you're doing something with, let's say, After Effects, you're going to want to obviously, get more VRAM from the GPU. But for the average creator, I think like if you want to keep it future proof, you're keeping this for like 5 years. You probably want to go. Do they have an i7 model here? I'm trying to see here. Hold on.
It exists. Yeah. Yeah. In the top spec one. Yeah. There's an i7, the 8-core i7.
Yeah. So I would honestly, if you want to future proof this for like the general creator who's going to grow into it, I would just stick with the 8-core i7. I would go with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And expand it later on. I mean, like right after, as soon as you get the thing in the house.
Yeah.
And then I would even, 1 terabyte SSD like we discussed. And then I would, let me see the GPU options here. Hold on, I'm just going to load it up.
Yeah, so I'd like to know about that. So there's the Radeon Pro 5700 and 5700 XT, and I don't know the difference of the XT. That's your world.
The XT basically is you get 16 gigabytes of GDR6 more memory, so you're using that. It's just more VRAM. That's all it is. So I think for most people,
the XT doesn't have its own meaning. It only is in reference to the.
It might have
VRAM.
Slightly. I don't know how much faster the clock speeds are on the GPU is, but I think it basically comes down to VRAM. So you're just paying for 8 gigabytes.
You might be like pretty safe for a lot of work just getting 5700 with 8 gigs.
Easily. Honestly, I would even if you're gaming on this thing, you're not going to see a performance difference jumping up to the XT. Right. Like honestly, the only reason to get the XT is if you're going hardcore into After Effects, you're going crazy in Photoshop or using anything that can actually take advantage of all that VRAM. Because even the best NVIDIA GPUs are only rocking 8 gigabytes of memory. So
right.
I think
so. This feels pretty good because then I'd say, okay, if you're editing video and you think you'll ever need it, if you ever might need the 10 gigabit Ethernet, get it.
Yeah.
Even if you don't think you'll need it. I mean, it's $100, which in the scale of things isn't much. So the computer that we just built, I mean, okay, wait, I'm pretty sure I'm looking at Canadian prices.
Yeah, this is Canadian, 3,700-ish.
I got 3829. Maybe we did something different.
Okay, so 8-core 10th gen standard glass or nano? Did you choose?
Let's add the nano because that's
okay.
That's what I wanted to make room for here. And
I got 8 gigabytes and then 5700, 1 terabyte, gigabit Ethernet, and I got 4329 Canadian.
Okay, yeah. So, I think getting in for under 5,000 for basically for an iMac Pro, right? Like that's great. Like I think this is I don't know. I've been really happy with this release. Like,
yeah,
if you just need a workhorse that's just going to get things done for you for a long time, for years to come, like I don't know. I'm excited. I'm more excited than I should be about like a very old release of an iMac, but they did it right. I think there's a lot of really great choices in here. Not to say that I'm not excited for what's going to come after it, but
yeah. And I also think it makes more sense for a lot of people to buy the iMac 27-inch instead of looking at the iMac Pros, because those are becoming kind of redundant right now. Unless you need like all those cores, but I don't think most people do.
I definitely expect Apple to move away from the iMac Pro. The Mac Pro is the replacement for that. I just, they were, if anyone doesn't remember, they released the iMac Pro because they had kind of made everything a little bit more consumer and just weren't going for that high-end market anymore. I mean, they wouldn't describe it this way, but this is how I perceived it. Everything had kind of like moved down a little bit to just be more mainstream available. And then they had some meetings, obviously behind closed doors, and then brought a few journalists in the room and said, guess what? We're going to make a Mac Pro, a real Mac Pro for pros, and still release the iMac Pro. And I think already at that point, they probably knew like, okay, the Mac Pro's the thing, and we're just going to make iMacs good enough for pros again, which that's fine. I mean, it's branding, I hope I can still buy a space gray one at some point because I love the color of the iMac Pro, but just for like usability, this is an awesome release. And if you're waiting for, if this is the kind of computer you need and you have a need for it this year, I wouldn't wait. I don't think that Apple Silicon iMacs are coming soon. And if they do, they'll be the smaller one. The rumors are, I think, 24 inches. But it's not going to have the big beefy video card. And I predict it will not be competitive with this 27-inch Intel Mac. And you'll be waiting much longer than fall 2020 if that's something you need. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, like, ARM processors, Apple's doing some crazy stuff with them, but like to have the kind of horsepower this new iMac has, it's going to take take some time for sure.
It won't be the first. Even if they already have it kind of ready, they won't release it first. They will release the things that their strong points, right? And because they just updated these, that's the clearest signal. I mean, if you needed a reason to know that it won't be updated soon.
So the question is, do you think they're going to release a MacBook? You think it's going to be the MacBook Air, or do you think it's going to be like the Mac Mini? Since they already have like kind of dev kits going around, there's a little bit of testing.
And is it going to be like more? Is it going to be more than like one machine? Like, will they kind of only do like one or two different models to kind of test the water, or will they, will they replace a lot of the MacBook line at first? Because there could be just a MacBook and a MacBook Pro, but I could also see them holding back on the MacBook Pro for a little while because. Again, they don't maybe those higher end processors aren't ready. That's the biggest question with all of this. And the reason that none of us can give remotely accurate predictions, because we don't know what Apple can do in that more performance requiring area, like those more powerful CPUs. We haven't seen them yet. So we don't know if they're hiding them under a table or if they aren't ready for them. So that will make a huge difference in terms of when they release what.
I'm super curious to see what they do with the GPUs. Cause ARM,
totally.
Like, are they going to combine like an ARM processor, an Apple Silicon component with like an AMD GPU, or are they going to continue using their own GPUs?
Will it be like what they do on an iPad and iPhone?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm super
integrated.
Curious about.
And I'm expecting that on the Mac Pro, it'll still they'll be able to use the like acceleration of an external GPU or a third party GPU, but most of them will come with something that's integrated, and it'll be really good.
Yeah,
I mean, because that the lower end, the lower it is on the price point, they will not have a dedicated GPU.
I agree.
Obviously,
yeah.
Like
the Mac Mini won't.
And I bet the integrated GPU is going to be great, because it already is on the phones and on the iPads, right?
That's true.
So I think you'll be able to like move pretty high up the ladder before you start getting something dedicated. And then I imagine, it's hard to imagine a Mac Pro that doesn't, like that wouldn't be very pro.
For sure. But this also closes a bunch of doors too. Like, I mean, obviously it's a good thing for Apple because they can shut down Hackintoshes. But it's also, not a good thing for mixed environments, because I used to work in IT and I used to carry a Mac purposely because my environment was a film school and a design school, and being able to go back and forth between, Mac OS and Windows was a must. So I think everything going forward is going to have to be used in some sort of parallels application, or maybe there's going to be some sort of deal struck between Microsoft and Apple, because I know Microsoft is doing some sort of weird licensing with their ARM architecture, their Windows 10 coming up. So that'll be interesting to see as well.
Yeah, I have no idea what they're going to end up doing.
There's a lot coming up.
They're not hinting. Like, they're not letting us know right now.
Of course not.
Very much waiting. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Glamma. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues, nonprofit organization Glamma, health professionals advancing LGBTQ equality, is raising vital awareness for LGBTQ plus healthcare workers who are risking their lives on the front lines. And the easiest way to show your support is just to head over to Instagram and check out the Glamma Rainbow Face Mask Filter. Just search for GLMA in the filters area, and you can instantly have a rainbow face mask on your face and join them in thanking these healthcare heroes. They're doing great work out there. So visit glma.org and follow glma.lgbtqhealth to find out more. Thanks again to Glamma for supporting the show. This is a great place to get into Mac versus PC and take the gloves off.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, I mean, my story, it was kind of similar when I was in school. When I was in college, that was the time that I switched away from Mac. Previous to that, when I was a teenager, I was using a Mac, and then I got a PC because it was cheap. Right? Like, I was going to college. I'm like, well, I got some money to spend. I could either get just a Mac, or I could get a PC and a video camera, like a camcorder. So I got both. And it totally made sense at the time, and it was totally worth it. And I really enjoyed building that PC myself and maintaining it and upgrading it. I loved it. It was a great experience. And at school, all of the computer labs were all Mac. So right. I was going home and working on a PC and going to school and working on a Mac. Then I got my first job, and they're like, well, what kind of computer do you want? And I was like, well, I've been using a PC, so get me a PC. And Kelly Thompson, who's been on the show a few times, my old boss, was like, well, no, I'm getting you a Mac. And I'm glad he did, because that really like fully switched me back. And then I started buying them myself too.
Do you think personally, like, this is just like do you think your career, the way you work would change? Like, do you think you'd be doing something different, or your workflow would be totally different if you stuck with PC? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I'd be fixing my computer a lot more.
Ooh, okay. This is how we're going to start this. Okay, all right.
Well, no, I'd probably be experimenting more too. I'd be like using more interesting software that like I want to play with sometimes, but I'm sort of limited on the Mac side. Like, I'd love to play with more 3D stuff. And then I would have more, I'd probably always have a better GPU.
Right.
And that means that, I could have been watching Blender tutorials and playing with some experiments on that side. They're like, on my MacBook Pro, I'm not going to experiment to that world because it's going to take forever. Like I know what it's going to look like. Yeah. It's already not great in After Effects. There's all sorts of interesting things that like I probably would just be dabbling with a little bit more, because that's something that Windows and PCs lead to, is a little more experimentation in certain ways. Like being able to do my own, what do you call it? The artificial intelligence face replace, deepfakes. Right, deepfakes. I'd love to experiment with deepfakes. But I don't touch any of that because I'm on a Mac. So
I don't know. This is the way I feel. Like for me, it was the opposite. Like my family was a Mac family. My dad ran this, this print company. He used to do all the ads for Loblaws and Beaver Lumber here in Canada and everything for print. And my first computer was a Mac. But then my cousin was a PC enthusiast, and he got me into building computers. At the end of there's something fulfilling about building your own computer, because it makes you feel like you accomplished something. But the way I see it is that, yes, technically I have more flexibility on a Windows machine, even though there's a lot more headaches sometimes. I have the ability to game. I have the ability to do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about limitations in terms of hardware. But the one thing that I love about Mac that I feel no one really emphasizes a lot is it kind of just pushes out those distractions. Because like when you're sitting down, the capabilities of your Macs, you bought it for a specific tool. You don't have to worry about tinkering with anything. You're focused, and that's it. And I find that like when you have less distractions on your mind, you're able to sit there and create better.
I see that come at me as a argument against Macs.
Oh, really? Okay.
Often, like people. Well, yeah, from the PC perspective, and Mac users would all see this as a benefit. But what you'll see certain PC communities say is like, look at that, there you go, another Mac user that doesn't understand the computer, that doesn't know what's inside of it, and you're not in touch with your machine. And I can see that. I get what that means from the PC side. I totally understand where that emotion comes from. But what I think they aren't understanding is what you just described, of how much it's the same as, or it's similar to how certain people, Steve Jobs was famous for this, Barack Obama, will wear the same outfit every single day, because then they don't have to make any decisions in the morning about what they're going to wear.
Right.
There's a lot of people that have talked about this, and people that are very creative and productive. And I can relate to that a lot. It's like this feeling of this liberation of, I don't need to be focused on what isn't the most important thing I can do with my time.
Right. Like a lot of people will argue that these are just little things, but when you start having all these little things, compile on top of each other, it becomes like, it weighs you down, even if it's tiny. Like if it's repetitive over and over and over, then you have to like, I'm going to do this to have to worry about this problem or worry about that issue. And in all fairness, Windows computers are not like they used to be in terms of the problems they sometimes have, but
I hear that. Yeah.
But it's just getting up and going with no distractions, nothing in the way. And that's the important
If I can
thing.
just bitch and moan about the last time that I ran into some issues.
Let's hear it.
So the last time was like setting up a new PC, which like, I don't do that much and I don't spend that much time on them. But I was just like, okay, I'm just going to be using this for like, I'm going to do some Resolve work. It's kind of like a B computer. I'll be doing maybe add a podcast on it sometimes and use it as a bit of a render engine. I spent a good 2 hours just trying to turn off this crazy reverb coming from nowhere.
What?
That the sound card was applying. Yeah, the sound card was just like, oh, we're in reverb mode, right? Or like auto sound enhancement mode. And I'm like, obviously I never ever would have wanted that, but you made it the default.
Oh my God.
And it just and just like, I'm like, I don't know what's going on, because again, part of the issue when you're searching for stuff in PC land is there are more different components that exist. So when you Google for search results, there's not necessarily as many people facing that same issue. And they may have had different solutions depending on their hardware configurations.
Yeah.
So the fact that was kind of my like most recent reintroduction, I was just like,
sounds like an Acer laptop.
So much time.
Or
yeah, it was an Acer.
Was it? Okay.
It's like, it doesn't make this doesn't make it bad.
Right,
like,
right.
I don't think this means people shouldn't buy it. If it still fits your needs, you should these are just like, this is why.
Well, here's the thing about PCs, okay? Especially with laptops. I mean, I've reviewed so many of them. Here's the thing: like, not one of them is perfect in every area. Like, let's think about history in terms of Macs. Like, what did we really complain about? It was keyboards. We had keyboard issues, and you couldn't expand it. Like, that was basically the biggest issues with Macs in the past like 8 years or whatever. With PCs, you might buy one type of laptop, but that laptop might not have the greatest keyboard, but it might excel, let's say, in battery life. There's no like good all-arounder laptop, where I feel like when you buy a MacBook, yes, it's more expensive. It may not have like the nicest design anymore because PC manufacturers have catched up, but everything like is still top notch. Like, I still use them as the gold standard for touchpads. I still use them to compare for the gold standard as sound, because the speakers are so good. There's better keyboards out there, but the keyboard is still great.
I was shocked when I started using different touchpads. Like, when I started experiencing more PC laptops, I'm like, wait, they all have bad mouse pads here? Like, the trackpads are all bad? Is that really the case? And I haven't come across one that competes with a Mac at all.
Have you tried the Surface Book?
The Go ones, like the smaller ones.
No. Not the ones with attachable keyboards. But if you try a Surface laptop, like the regular traditional one, or the Surface Book, they're the closest you can get to a Mac.
All the Microsoft hardware is super nice.
It is.
Like,
it is.
So it feels so good. So I fully believe you on that. But it's weird how many of them are just like off. But you're supposed to be the one saying all the nice stuff about PCs.
Okay, that's it. That's it. All right, so listen. No, but here's the thing.
But like really, like, why, other than cost?
Okay.
What are some of the other like really important, great reasons to go with Windows in a PC?
Expandability, flexibility, and you can basically do everything. So, for example, let's just take podcasting, for example. Okay, it wasn't until recently you could use OBS on a Mac, where it's always been a non-issue on a PC.
Right.
If I just want to get up and game, I don't have to buy a different computer. I can just use my Windows PC. If I want to install Linux, I don't have to jump through hoops. I mean, even though technically the Mac is using Unix as a kernel. I mean, there's just that. It's like Android. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so much customization in terms of how you use your computer. And then like, oh, this component's not working. Okay, I'll just take it out and I'll upgrade it. I don't have to buy a whole new computer. Like, there's just that freedom.
How does that end up playing out in reality, the upgrade cycle? Because, I remember what it was like for me, but I haven't done it enough times. Like, this was years ago. Does it like... Because it feels like you still don't end up extending the life of your machine longer than you would have a Mac. So like you just mentioned 5 years as an upgrade cycle, which that's pretty, I think, common in the Mac world. Right. But do you end up having a PC that lasts 7 years?
Well,
like,
that's
does
the
it
thing.
actually...
Like, with the Intel processors that are out right now, like the performance difference between like the last 3 to 4 years have been so insignificant that like... You could I still have computers that are using 2nd and 3rd gen Intel processors, and the things that I upgraded were just RAM, more storage if I needed, or if I was using an old hard drive, I'd put an SSD, and GPU, and they perform amazingly, which is something you wouldn't be able to do on a Mac. Now, if this is your one device and you have a little bit more money to burn, you might not care as much. But if you're someone who's on a tight budget, being able to just like upgrade your GPU and get really great performance in a game using an older CPU is like one of the best feelings.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lot of it too. It's like it's hard to argue with the emotion of feeling like when you make that upgrade yourself and you're like, wow, this machine that was pissing me off last night because it was so slow. I just stuck a new card in there and all of a sudden it's screaming. Like, that feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I miss all the time from the Mac world. There's no like really quick way to just suddenly juice. Well, although now, Apple's been embracing eGPUs a little bit more and
Right.
supporting them more widely. So then at least we have that now, but up until recently. And actually, sorry to circle back to it.
Yeah, no problem.
Is this so I think I saw somewhere that the Radeons that they're including in the 27-inch are the same or similar to what was in the Blackmagic eGPUs before this.
I don't remember.
No, wait, what I saw. Okay, you know what I saw. This is pretty cool. Everybody should track down the Max Tech videos. But he was benchmarking actually the new GPUs in the latest 16-inch MacBook Pros, and those were very similar to the Blackmagic eGPUs, which is pretty awesome. That all of a sudden the internal is competing with the external.
Were they actually getting similar performance, like the external GPU?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And so the thing, I don't think it's the same number. I think the performance was pretty similar.
Interesting.
So that's pretty cool.
Because I've run into, like, I know even TLD, for example, he's run into problems where the eGPU doesn't perform. Let's say you're using Final Cut.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to turn off the eGPU.
Exactly.
They're too finicky. That's the problem. And like,
so I haven't bought one because of that. I'm like, and for a long time when they first came out as well, a lot of programs weren't even using them. Final Cut wasn't tapping the GPU when it exported. It was like just using the internal and stuff like that. So.
When people talk about eGPUs, the only time I recommend buying one is if you're carrying, let's say, a MacBook Pro 13 or any sort of Ultrabook that doesn't have an external GPU, then I think it's kind of worth it. But like to upgrade, I don't know, an iMac or a MacBook Pro 16 with an external GPU seems, I don't know, it just seems like a very expensive and not worthy companion. Do you know what I mean? Right. Just because at that point, like if you need to upgrade to an external GPU, it's probably just makes more sense to sell your laptop and buy a new MacBook Pro or something.
So here's another place that doesn't make sense in the PC world for me is I don't see why people, except that you can sometimes save money, but the sort of like mid-range is where I see it hard to justify going for a PC over a Mac, unless it's the platform. Of course, now if you need Windows, makes sense. But when I get it if you want like a gaming laptop or like a really, high performance GPU inside of a laptop, hard to get that, or you're not going to get the same kind of thing on the Mac side. And then I can also understand the very low end, price is your whole concern. So then you have to go for a PC if you just, you need the most affordable thing out there. Everything in between, I have a hard time justifying not getting a Mac. Am I thinking about that?
So give me an example of like an in-between Windows PC for you.
I'm gonna get all the names wrong. So you give me the example. What are the
you take a Dell XPS 15 for example. Okay,
that's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, sorry. The XPS 13 is like the perfect example of like the in-between.
Yeah, so the Dell XPS 13 would be similar to a MacBook Pro 13 in terms of performance, let's say. And then you would take the Dell XPS 15 or 17, and depending on how you spec it, it could be a mid-range laptop or it could be a high-end performer. So like, for example, the Dell XPS 17, which is, really good computer minus a few quality control issues, is cheaper, $800 to $900 cheaper than a MacBook Pro 16, but there's a lottery to play. Like Dell has this roundup has had a terrible quality control, especially with the touchpads. Okay. I don't want to get into it, but it's too bad because this is one of the most beautiful Windows PCs I've seen in a long time.
Yeah. it looks really nice. And I know a lot of people that really like it a lot, but when I see people that are choosing it, I guess if the price difference is significant enough, then I still get it.
Right.
For a similar spec. When I see some of the prices on the PC side, sometimes they're looking kind of similar. And then I'm like, well, now I'm a little unsure, but I also, maybe I just can't relate to the people that really do prefer Windows because it's uncomfortable for me.
Right.
So.
It depends what you're doing. Like if you're a developer, like even if you're looking at a comparable PC, depending on the type of development you're doing, it's most likely going to be better on the Mac because you have access to that Unix kernel, which compiles code faster. Like I've done tests with this MacBook Pro 13 and it dominates like a lot of Windows ultra portables just because of the way it's optimized, right? Because of that. Yeah. But it just depends on the situation you're in. If the mid-range market to me, honestly, is the upsell market. Like it either upsells you or it doesn't, right? And then you're kind of stuck in this like middle ground of making too many sacrifices. Because when you're on a tight budget, you already know what you're sacrificing. When you're in the mid-range market, you're like, oh man, Like I'm right here. Should I just buy the more expensive thing
Yeah,
and just deal with it? So
you end up right on the edge of high end anyway. So
yeah, so like take a mid-range Dell XPS 15. You're probably getting a 6-core processor. It's probably going to cost you $1,500, which is like a mid-range price. Maybe you don't get a GPU with it unless you pay more to get the GTX 1650 Ti. So you're making sacrifices, right? But then you take a MacBook Pro 16, and then I don't know what the prices are on that, but you probably have to spend a lot more just to get a GPU, the proper.
I just got to say, I can't imagine how you hold so many specs in your mind at a time.
It's disgusting.
Like, there's things I know about a lot of different products, but usually I get to know those specs if I'm considering buying it. So I know a lot about all the things that I've either have bought or almost bought, but I find it really challenging to keep everything in my mind about stuff that I didn't touch or haven't personally used. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, like,
how do you do it? It's crazy.
So here, like, it's when obviously I'm getting bombarded with Windows laptops, so keeping the specs in my mind are quite easy. But you kind of know, as soon as you hear the price and as soon as you hear the segment it's for, you kind of already know what the specs are. So like, if you're looking at a high Windows laptop, it's going to be like a 10th gen 10875H processor, which is like an 8-core, right? If it's a budget laptop, it's going to be an i5. 10500 or 9300H from last year. If you're looking at a budget a GPU, it's going to be like a 1650 or 1650 Ti, or if you're going mid-range, it's going to be an RTX 2060 or RTX 2060 Max-Q. And then as soon as you go to high range,
I got to be honest, I haven't heard anything you said in the last 30 seconds.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm getting 2 specs. Anyways, the bottom line is
it's just letter and number suit.
Yeah, so I know I'm getting to enthusiast level for this podcast, but
but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about.
But most people don't
I'm
care,
amazed that you
right?
can hold all that in your mind at once. Yeah. But it's valuable. You wouldn't be able to do what you do without it. Because,
exactly. I mean, when I review these products, I try to stay in the middle. Like Linus, who's amazing. He does a lot. He's more hardcore enthusiast,
deep
right?
Dive.
Yeah, deep dive, and you need that. But I try to stay in the middle because I know there's a lot of people who are watching my videos that just they don't care. First of all, and it's too much.
This is a challenge.
It is.
I run into this too of like, okay, here's the problem. The people that are going to comment the most are going to get, and they're good because they're angry because you seem like you were too superficial. That may not at all be the biggest audience. And I don't know that for sure. This is a little bit, I just feel like most people that buy computers don't know shit about computers.
It's true.
And, they don't know what all these numbers mean. And they're just searching Google for, which PC laptop should I buy? What should be my first Mac? And I did get a lot of those comments on a recent video because the last video had that sort of like got like popped a bit and got some numbers, was the first things you should do on your new MacBook.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of new Mac users there, and I really saw like, here's how many people are out there that like, they don't really know how to use their computer yet. They weren't really sure about what they bought. And there are so many people out there. And I think they are not going to get angry about the way that you represented some, GPU spec.
Oh, for sure.
And write a comment about it. They're just going to watch it and then go buy their laptop without having said anything to you because this isn't they're not passionate about it. Same way that when I need to fix my plumbing, I'm not likely to leave a comment getting angry about which wrench you used because I don't know anything about it. I just needed to know how to do this thing. So I watched your tutorial. Yeah. But I never comment on it.
It's funny you mentioned that because like if I do an unboxing video, for example, and like I'm not your typical unboxer, like I will throw in some specs and I'll talk about some of the performance or whatever. I'll keep it simple though. And I find that like more people are happy when I do that. But then there's always that, like you said, there's a smaller, more hardcore audience that wants like the more detailed review. Because like if you think about it, like the audience on YouTube specifically is between 18 and 34. So yeah, you have like the younger age who are probably like really into computers, but then you have those like 34-year-olds who just want you to like shut up and tell them what to buy. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
It's crazy. You can't win though.
It's the same as on the Mac side. Posting Mac videos attracts PC users, and this is actually even more specific in the Android world. They're like Android people. I don't know who said this, so it's not my idea, but like Android people watch iPhone videos. iPhone people don't watch Android videos.
I heard that before too, and I agree.
And it's totally true.
Android, like Android people are so toxic. If you are, let's say for example, I used to review Sony phones every single year. the Sony Xperias. People would come to my channel just to watch my Sony Xperia review because I was one of the people who were reviewing them. I stopped reviewing them just because they pulled out of Canada, Sony's mobile team, so I couldn't get units anymore. I would get people getting angry at me because I wasn't reviewing Sony phones. And then if you review some other phone and you say something bad about a different phone, they start yelling at you because they're passionate about that one specific brand. But when you review an iPhone, the only people that I hear complaining are Android. Why would you buy this? It's too expensive. Oh, you can get this spec and that spec for this much money.
And I'm just like,
shut up.
Why did you click on this? Why are you here? Like, you are only here to say that.
Exactly. They're just, you know what it is? They're bored. Maybe they're just not having a good day.
And it's their sports too.
Exactly.
You know, which like I'm not I dislike sports.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you like sports, but like I don't like sports culture. I don't like that about it.
Right.
That people like will argue about it when they chose their teams arbitrarily, not even necessarily based on the city that they live in. I'm like, I just can't get behind that, being angry about something so arbitrary. So when I see it in the tech world, I'm like, you guys are wasting my time and your time and making the world worse.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure you just ignore those comments. You have to. Like, I mean, they're not really adding any value to your channel, and just responding to them is just gonna like fuel their fire for them to say something else that's gonna make you angry. It's just a waste of your time.
Do you have any wisdom to close out this segment, this idea of like, you know, why should people buy what? And I don't know, like,
why should people buy what?
I don't feel like we solved it. Like, what's the solution of Mac versus PC?
You know what? I don't think there is a solution. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to what you need to do to get the job done. If you feel that the Mac is going to be able to do that for you, then buy a Mac.
Maybe I have a better way to wrap it up.
Okay.
Maybe, because I have something more. I have more specific questions. Like, okay, so me as somebody that like mostly has a Mac workflow, can you justify a reason that like I could like I want to have a big beefy PC in my world? What's the name of the company you mentioned a minute ago?
Puget. Yeah, or
Puget.
Main Gear. There's tons of them. There's tons of great big companies.
I want one of those. I want to justify that. How could I like integrate that into my world and make sense of it even while I'm using Macs as my primary machines?
Well, I think if you could find a way to grow into it, you could offer yourself a lot more expandability in the future, especially if, you know, let's say, you know, you're a podcaster, maybe you're going to start streaming on Twitch, for example. You have a show coming up, I don't know. And then I could do that. You could use your old Macs.
I could stream this show.
There you go. You could stream this show, and then you can have a second PC, which is Windows, taking care of all that for you. It's a lot cheaper, and I think it'll last you longer because you don't need as crazy hardware to do it. And that could be a good solution for you. But besides that, like, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, if it's working for you, then there's no reason to change, you know, like there just isn't. It's whatever makes you happy. Well,
I probably won't. I'll never be the person posting the why I switched video, just in case anybody's waiting for me to
Look,
do that.
In a perfect world, I would, you know, like I can't favor one over the other. I like them both in their own ways.
Totally.
And, you know, if I could, I would run all Macs and then just have a gaming PC. But because I use Adobe Premiere and because I game and because I have a two PC stream set up, I have to live in both worlds. So for me, and just love it all.
That's part of the thing I wanted to just touch on before we wrap it up too, is that experience of choosing the software and that there are pluses and minuses from it. So I'm now in the Final Cut world, and I went from Final Cut to Premiere back to Final Cut. That's actually, I guess, in the same way that I did PCs, but at very different times. That was all on Mac. But there are advantages in both directions. So living on Final Cut right now, I'm completely experiencing the beauty of the optimization. Exports are very fast. Playback is always very fast. Everything is quick and responsive. It crashes less. It does still crash. It's totally
everything crashes.
Perfect. Yeah. It's like there are issues. There are still bugs. Mm-hmm. There are still some things that it doesn't do as well as Premiere for sure. But yeah, overall, I love that. I love that experience. It's smoother.
Right.
And I get more out of my hardware. Mm-hmm. What I really like about the Premiere or if you live with the whole Adobe suite, is that you can move back and forth. Like you could have a giant, amazing PC at home and then be on the road with your MacBook.
That's exactly what I do.
Move those files back and forth. Yeah, like that sounds pretty great.
That's what I do. When I travel, the MacBook Pro 16, when I'm at home on the PC, and that's it, you know?
Cool. And it works.
And it works. That's all that matters. at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I just wanted to close that circle. And then I want to talk a bit about, I don't know how much, I didn't ask you how much you care about this. And I don't think you care about it as much as I do, but I want to talk about some of the new cameras.
Okay.
Because
Sure.
I keep bringing it up. So I got to at least update some of the things that have happened lately, because it's just been such a crazy year for camera news. Like, have you
nuts.
been following it at all?
I have. I
I
mean, the Canon was overheating. Then apparently there was a lie about the temperature check or something, and then.
Okay, so let's sum that up a little.
Okay.
And I shouldn't go too in depth because I'm sure it'll have moved by the time most people
Right.
hear this. And that's why I don't even want to get into the news too much about it, because
Okay.
it's like it just keeps moving fast and it's weird. But that's why it's so interesting. Like, usually camera news isn't this like weird. Usually it's just like, oh yeah, the camera came out, a bunch of people bought it, fanboys from either side fought about it, but it worked well. So the development was that EOS HD, he did some tests with thermometers and getting feedback directly from the sensor of the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it looks like the camera is using time as the metric to force you out because of overheating. It is not how hot the sensor is. It is the camera deciding like, you're out of time now. You've used this camera enough. You can't use it for a while, which is like, okay. But, and before I let anybody get too outraged, my take on it is first to give the benefit of the doubt to the engineers at Canon, because I always feel like when you have hobbyist engineers weighing in on the internet saying like, look, Canon designed this so poorly, or Apple has no idea how to design an iPhone. If they had just put the battery 2 inches higher and used these components, it would run faster. And I'm like, you know what? The professionals in these companies have their jobs for a reason. And I'm just more predisposed to trust the world-class camera engineers at Canon that are designing some of the best cameras in the world. They understand it better than any of the hobbyist engineers or, professional engineers that don't work exactly in that field.
Right.
I'm going to lean towards trusting that the people knew what they were doing, and that probably it was more of a PR mistake, that like the way that the feature is read on the screen, the way that the feature feels to use, or how it ends up as a user experience. It was more of a user experience decision that they thought would have the right consequences and that would be best for the camera. Like, I do think they were trying to do the best they could and made a big mistake that they didn't realize how bad this would look. And so it is still a mistake.
I think, it's probably just a proactive approach, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It looks bad.
It does look bad, for sure, because it's all over the place. But what can you do, right?
Oh, they're going to, and no matter what, it is bad, because Canon's going to be fighting this reputation for a decade, for years. Yeah. Like, it's going to look so bad. And Canon was traditionally not the one with the reputation for poor quality. Like, Sony is supposed to be the flaky ones, and Canons are supposed to be old, reliable.
That's not good.
I just don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah. Are you watching the Fortnite versus Apple stuff?
Oh, not closely. So it just kind of came out, and I saw headlines. I haven't dug into it.
That's another.
But
I guess
it seems
that's
like
another podcast, probably. But it's.
Is it obvious who's right and wrong yet?
Well, I mean, look, this was obviously planned by Epic Games. Like, they come out, they come out in one day with this whole promotional video showing how Apple is this like dystopian company trying to, control a market and take money from people or the developers. And then they have this like video about it that's like literally live streaming 24 hours a day on Twitch and YouTube. And then on the same day, they also sue Apple for civil rights movement, not asking for any money or anything, just rights to be in the App Store. But it's just so weird. Like, this was obviously planned. Microsoft had their issues, then Epic Games comes out, and then Spotify releases a memo about it saying, good for you, Epic Games. Like, this is it's obviously they're doing this to take advantage of what's going on in the States in terms of these antitrust hearings. So
yeah, for sure.
It's a mess.
And just like there's been all this like, bad sentiment about the App Store lately.
Right.
And I think for some of the earlier, there are good reasons to be really frustrated with the App Store right now. Like, some of Apple's policies with it are coming from the wrong place and have the wrong results for developers, like are only bad for developers and then also bad for users. There are a bunch of those things. My impression so far of what Fortnite is doing is, it seems like they're taking advantage of that.
Oh, for sure.
Nilay Patel was tweeting that like the lawyers they have on board are the ones that have won some very significant cases recently. So they probably know what they're doing and probably, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get too into it.
I don't get too into it, but I
just
just thought I'd mention it since it was the news of the week. But that was pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, it is. Okay, and then so my personal news of the week too. Okay, this isn't news yet, but I'm going to follow up on it later. So I've been going really back and forth between like, okay, is the Canon the next camera that I need, the R6 or R5, or is the Sony A7S III? Because they are all so good. And you know, I've all this Canon glass. I prefer using a Canon. There's a lot of things in the past that have really bothered me about Sony's that I've shot on, because I shot a lot of videos on Sony. You know, the quality is great, the feature set's amazing, usability sucks.
Yeah.
And the lenses have
they changed the menus though. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. No, they totally. Oh no,
Yeah.
like so much credit to Sony for what they did. They really, they read the room perfectly and released what most people want. What I've started thinking about lately and am going to be testing this week is the new Red Komodo.
Ooh.
Which, have you taken a look at it?
Yeah, I know someone who has it. They love it. My friend, you know, Justin,
Yeah.
he just bought one too. And
Right.
he loves the size.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he loves it.
I've never, Justin gets all the best pro gear. I've never had any of these like super high end. I've never had a Red. I've never even shot on a Red. I've
Yeah.
used an Alexa, but I haven't shot a Red. So to me, I wasn't even looking at that world, but a friend is getting one this week that I'll be able to have some access to it and test it out. So hopefully I'll be able to do a YouTube video about that soon. But I just started like looking at the feature set. I'm like, wait a minute, why am I not looking at this? You know, it's like, it's only moderately more expensive. You know, it's like twice as expensive as the A7S III.
But for a Red, that's good.
About,
you know what I mean? Like that's good for a Red. And it's small.
It's still a really good price. It's 6K. It has a global shutter, which if you don't know what that is, it's sort of an expectation for like Hollywood. You know, it means that each frame is taken independently, and you're not going to get, most of all, you'll never get any of that warping jello frame as you move the camera left to right.
Wow. Yeah.
So it is a Red sensor. It's a it's a professional sensor with
tempting.
more dynamic range than a C200 or a C500. And I'm like, why am I not looking at this? And then it takes Canon lenses. It takes CFast cards, which I already have. Whereas if I got the Canon R5, I'd had to buy these new, very expensive, very fancy, hard to even get CFast card or CF Express.
Tyler, I hate to say it, but I think you already made your decision.
I mean, well, yeah, like, so now I'm going to take it for a spin. Like, of
Yeah,
course, there could be just something I hate about it, maybe, right? The biggest thing, the thing that I won't know about is like, no, I was about to say no autofocus.
That's standard.
Unproven autofocus.
Yeah.
They're just they are doing it, which I actually didn't even know until like I started digging into this. But yeah, they're trying to do it. They are hoping to release face detect in a firmware update.
Oh, wow.
Which all of that leads me to think like, okay, don't put too much confidence in it because it'll be a beta and, you know, it'll take a few years to straighten that out. But it's using these Canon lenses with great autofocus.
I think the only drawback is you have to buy tons of expensive accessories to attach to it, because I know Red accessories are really expensive.
Yes, but that also got a lot better. So what's that other company called? Yeah, GDU. So Jared from Red also started another company that is making accessories for Red. I'm just trying to remember if those are the letters. Yeah, GDU. So they're making accessories as well, and like it's not. You have to buy a lot less of them. You don't have to buy the Red batteries anymore, which like that was super expensive. The Meg cards, you'd spend like $1,000 on one memory card that wasn't that big and wasn't doing anything very special. Now you're using, you know, just generic third-party memory cards that I already have a few of, and I only spent a few $100 on.
Oh, that's good.
It's using Canon batteries that I already have two of for my C200. I think it's the same ones as C200. There's just all this stuff that's like, oh wow, it just got so much more practical and affordable to get into a Red ecosystem and still have, hopefully, all the quality of this Red sensors.
I think you need to do a A7S III versus Red Komodo. video.
Oh, well, if I had an A7S III, I would. Yeah, anyway, I mean, we're very blessed this year. There's a ridiculous amount of great cameras coming out. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there that like now that's in my head too. So I thought I was just then the issue for me is then I don't have like, it's not a hybrid, right? So it's not going to shoot any stills.
Right.
So I don't know.
That's true. Yeah, no, just check it out, man. It seems like a lot of people are going crazy over it just because of the size alone. So it looks very promising.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bad year for the world, but a very good year for tech.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Which is weird, but
it's been very, very weird.
It's good for us, I guess.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about, and I'm glad that you came on. Where can people find you everywhere on the internet? Because you do a lot of good things that people should definitely be watching.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Matt Monas, and of course on YouTube, Matthew Monas 1. And I also want to make a huge announcement today. Rick Astley followed me on Twitter, so I was Rickrolled by Rick Astley himself, and that's the best thing I have to say.
That's true. I don't know if I want to go check and follow that up. I can take your word on that one.
It's true.
But
true story.
Don't take my word on his great content. You should go watch it for yourself. Thanks again for coming on, Matt.
Thank you.